The Conversation Hour with John Faine on 774 ABC Melbourne and ABC Victoria.
Welcome to today's very special Conversation Hour on 774 ABC Melbourne and ABC Victoria. It's the 30th anniversary of a television show that I never really understood the appeal of. Prisoner, yes, Prisoner turns 30, and this Sunday there is a get-together for those tragic enough to admit that they have an obsession with this cult television program. Today on the Conversation Hour we have assembled some of the protagonists, people who are quite happy sometimes to admit that they had a hand in the mayhem that was Prisoner. Our top dog today, Margo Gaffney, also known as Jane Clifton, joins me to co-host before we introduce you to a cast of thousands. Hello.
You've been waiting for this day, haven't you, John?
And you've been trying to put it off.
You've been waiting for this day a long time. And this is the day where an amnesty is declared. You can ask me anything. I'll talk about it at length, but hey, how was your trip?
If it was ever raised with you in the past, you used to say, oh, shut up, I'm not going there.
I was nicer than that.
Oh, barely. But what's changed?
It's every decade. You get a couple of minutes. This is it. Third decade. We can talk about it.
Do you have... Well, we'll talk about Prisoner in just a moment. Now, you've been travelling too, because have you written a book, or you're writing a book?
I went away to write a book, and when I came back, you were gone, off doing not writing a book. No. But we were both away for a long time. I was away for 3 months.
The premise of your trip was fascinating.
I went back to visit every house I've ever lived in my life, and there are 32 of them, and 16 of them were in the Northern Hemisphere. So I began in Gibraltar, where I was born, on the Rock.
And the reason you were born at Gibraltar is because?
My father was in the British Army, so we travelled a lot. So I went to every British Army base in Germany and Britain and Malaysia, trying to find these houses.
And then could you?
It was an incredible detective story. It was amazing, particularly in Malaysia, where, you know, what is it, 40 years or something since I was there. More.
I didn't ask.
Well, I'm turning 60 in April, so it was 50 years since I have been there. Yeah, you can look like that. You'll get your invitation. Anyway, it was 50 years since I'd been in Malaysia. And, of course, all the street names had English names when we were there, because we were the ruling party, you know. And now they've all got Malaysian names. But I enlisted the help of the entire Malaysian army and most of the tourist bureau, and had the most incredible adventure in Malaysia. And
which part of Malaysia did you live in?
Ipoh, which is north of Kuala Lumpur, and in fact the only way to get there is an 11-hour train trip from Singapore.
Oh, you should drive.
Well, I was too nervous because I hate heat. I was really nervous about Malaya. I just didn't want to be there, and I thought if the train breaks down, I'm going to die.
No.
The train, they keep at minus 20 degrees.
Yeah, very good infrastructure in a lot of those places.
But they don't tell you that, so I was shivering all the way in my little cotton top, but it was an incredible adventure. And in Germany...
Did you find these houses?
I found every single one of them.
Wow.
And they were all standing.
There
was only one barracks, but I knew it had been demolished in Dover. It was on the cliffs of Dover, and it's the Grand Shaft Barracks, built during the Napoleonic Wars, but it was demolished in the 50s, shortly after we lived there. So I knew that wasn't there, but I went back to the site, and that was everywhere I went was just the most amazing stories.
So did you kind of do the knock on the door thing?
I did, at every place. And some places I got in, and some places terribly disappointing. I went back to one place in Germany where I'd lived for 3 years as a kid. My first memories, you know, primary school, growing up. And
which part of Germany?
It was in Braunschweig, which is near Hanover. Mm-hmm. And I had
know it well, actually.
Ah, indeed.
Not far from some ancestral roots of ours.
Oh, indeed, where? Like Aachen and places like that? No, that's further down, isn't it? Yeah.
Leaving that aside, so this would have been near the, it's not that far from where the border was, which is further east is the border.
Well, yeah. Mönchengladbach, which I went down further, was very close to the border with Holland, and that was where we lived, is now a NATO base.
Oh.
And you need your passport to go on, and it's still an army base, so I got into that house. But this house in Braunschweig was this mansion that I grew up in, and it's now 3 apartments. And no one was home on both days that I went. And that was the thing with the trip, that I had such limited time once I got there. It was incredibly frustrating because, you know, and the language difficulties. But it was an amazing thing they were like old friends to see, you know. And the whole notion of the book is about houses and what they mean. And, you know, in this week it's been so redolent, people's houses demolished, and even if they build them again, it's not going to be the house that they had.
All the mementos, all your bits and pieces.
It's the way the light comes through the window and the way the door opens. It's that was what I went back to find in my book to look at that notion of home and where you belong. And it's just come into such sharp focus in the last week where all these houses have been demolished. I can really feel that sense, you know, of what you lose.
You know that feeling that you'll never be as big as the kids who are in 6th grade? Because they were really big, and it doesn't matter how much you grow up, you're never as big as they seemed to be. Is it the same with the old houses? They're not like you remember them?
No, I've got a pretty eidetic sort of photographic memory.
No, you're dangerous.
And most places were exactly as I remembered them.
Terrible.
But the thing that was extraordinary, most people who go back to their old houses or schools can't believe how small they were. That's right. The classic one. Yeah. But for me, they were the same size, but the places that were extraordinary were the woods at the end of the street where I used to play, or, you know, all the little cubby houses. They're all still there, and I couldn't believe how big they were. You know, they were amazing. So, you know, it was an incredible voyage of discovery.
Wonderful. When's the book come out?
I'm finishing the second draft as we speak. Then I go looking for a publisher.
Oh, you haven't got one yet?
No, I had to do it first. You know, it's one of those books you've got to do. You can tell people about the idea and they go, oh, great, you know. But, you know, what's it going to be like? And you don't even know yourself what's going to happen.
Yes.
I'm not famous enough to get a big deal for that, you know.
Jane Clifton, who is my co-host for a special conversation hour celebrating the 30th anniversary of the iconic cult, I think we can say, cult television show, Prisoner, and we have assembled a cast of thousands that we will be reunited live to air for this special occasion on today's conversation hour.
On 774 ABC Melbourne.
Jane Clifton is here to take us through and be ring mistress for the reassembled cast of Prisoner who join us on the conversation hour today. Colette Mann played Doreen Anderson. Val Lehman played Top Dog B. Smith. Morning to you both.
Good morning.
In our Brisbane studios, Carol Burns, Top Dog Franky Doyle. Carol.
Good morning.
Can you
Hi,
cope?
Hi,
Hello.
Carol.
And in our Sydney studios, Amanda Muggleton, who played Chrissie Latham. Morning, Amanda.
What about my baby, B?
And Fiona Spence, who played Officer Vera Bennett, and it falls to you, Vinegar Tits, to keep them all in line.
Good morning.
Hi, Fiona.
What's going on here? Clean up that mess.
There are so many excited people in this studio. Val, Colette, how did it all begin?
How did it all begin? A cattle call, as far as I remember, actually.
Oh, okay. Oh, it's in my
Yes, I can.
Yeah, you speak.
I remember doing 2 or 3 or 4 auditions, and then my final audition was with Val and with Sheila.
The screen test.
And it was the screen test, and then they offered me the role of Wonky Warner.
Wonky Warner. Now,
Yes.
whatever happened to Wonky?
I don't know, but which was
Cried
Lynn
a lot.
Warner, which was played by Kerry Armstrong. But then about 2 minutes before we started shooting, they said, no, you're playing Doreen.
Now, originally this show was going to be like 16 weeks long or something, wasn't it? It was only
1 hour episodes.
1 hour, and it was really the Franky Doyle story, wasn't it, Carol?
Yes, I think I was only in the show for 19 episodes. That was my original contract. And out of that material that they got with that particular character, who was the first butch lesbian on Australian television.
Say that again.
I played the first butch lesbian on, she was a bull dyke.
Mm-hmm.
Carol, there's no need to be so plain.
Well, this was the wonderful thing about the script. It was about
was her job.
plain-speaking women.
Yep.
It was played by plain-looking women. I thought that was the landmark.
Speak for yourself.
It used to take hours for me in makeup to look that plain.
I had a head, yes. There was a
I was
wonderful...
so good, so I wore no makeup to look that bad.
Sorry, Carol.
We had a wonderful makeup artist who used to stick cochineal on my teeth every morning to stain them the way the nicotine would.
And you've never been able to get it off.
and Fiona Spence, the hours that were spent on your French role, of course.
Oh, yes, they're not. Well, towards the end, after I left, it just fell off. Their hair was all dead. They're completely dead, so they're not just fell off.
And the hair all dragged back and the eyes permanently slanted.
To explain, Fiona's character Vera had her hair in a very tight French roll for almost how many years?
It was a bun.
It was a bun. How many years was it, that bun?
2.5, I think. Oh, when she had a love interest, which was very rarely, the hair did go into a French roll. That was her idea of letting her hair down,
so to speak.
And you got makeup.
Not much. I remember the biggest audience that I'd had before Prisoner was having my ears pierced in the ground floor of Myers, and then of course driving out to Nunawading where the elephants go to die was. I had just had to take them out, so of course I never wore the earrings ever again after I started playing Vera.
Ladies and gentlemen, Fiona Spence doing stand-up comedy.
And doing a very good job of it.
Fabulous. She is one of the funniest women I have ever met.
Amanda Muggleton.
Yes, my darling.
Hello, darling. What
Hello,
about Baby B? We said
What
much
about my
quoted.
Baby B?
Chrissie, much quoted.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about Chrissie.
Well, I wasn't allowed to audition for the role because I'd never done television before, so my agent wouldn't let me audition. So I barged my way in completely unannounced.
That's unlike you, Amanda.
And when it got to my name, because if you remember that cattle call, there were hundreds of people waiting. And as I got closer and closer to the door that you went into to do the screen test with, a woman came up to me and she said, name? And I said, Amanda Muggleton. And she looked down the list, and of course my name wasn't on the list at all. So she said, I'm sorry, dear, I can't let you in. I said, what do you mean you can't let me in? I've been here for an hour and a half. Look at me. I said, I'm dolled up to the nines. Are you telling me I can't go through that door just because I'm not on some list? Just a minute, she said, because there were no mobile phones then, or if there were, I didn't.
There were
have
barely
one.
television sets when we were around.
Anyway, I got in, and they took one look at me and thought I could play Marilyn, who ended up being Margaret Lawrence.
Oh, screwing up in the ceiling with the
Screwing
electrician.
Eddie the electrician.
And then they thought,
Richard
no,
Moore.
that you're not right for that, but we're looking for a prisoner called Chrissie Latham. She's only going to be in for 2 weeks.
That's what they thought.
Just so she can kill Bill, with a pair of scissors, which is what I ended up doing. And then apparently there was a bit of fan mail saying, bring that mad woman back. We love
Written
her.
by Amanda. Oh, no, sorry.
And then I got in, and then I got life, of course, because I'd murdered the doctor because he didn't love me.
Well, that's what I would do too.
No, let's have our personal life truly on this. Now, John spoke before, Mr. Faine. He's been very quiet today. He's very well behaved, just laughing, about not really understanding the appeal of the show, and he teases me continually about being on it. But the important thing that I try to explain to people, and I don't know about the rest of you, is that it was seminal television. It hasn't changed the landscape.
What does that word mean,
So it means it was groundbreaking television.
I thought it had
You're on
something to
the
do with
ABC. There was no semen in that
See,
show.
that's why they won't give me a job here. They always say I'm too
Coming
loud.
out for it though. for the reunion.
Coming to visit, you mean? Yeah, that's it, right. It was groundbreaking television in the sense that it was a show driven by female characters, and they weren't glamazons by any stretch of the imagination.
There were hardly any blokes in it. There's a handful of them, and they were token males.
Isn't that
We had
nice?
Fletch the Lech. We had Gerard
Yeah,
Maguire.
We did.
But John, are you saying you didn't ever watch us?
I did watch you. I did watch you, but I never
Another closet prisoner watcher.
But I didn't become obsessed with the show, and I want to ask each of you, what do you think of people who are still, even 30 years on, still obsessed with the show? Do you get stalkers?
Yes.
I've just come back from England where I was mobbed. I mean, it was unbelievable to me. I'm completely gobsmacked. I went back, actually, to bring my father back from London, who's still here, and through Val and through a couple of other people in England, the great event organiser.
That's true.
She got me into all sorts of trouble. No, she got me into some fabulous things. A weekend in Birmingham called Memorabilia Weekend, and I thought, oh, nobody will know who I am.
Well, if you've ever watched a movie called Galaxy Quest, it's very similar.
Yes, it is similar.
Fantastic.
So what happened?
Well, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of fans line up to meet you, greet you, have their photo taken with you, sign autographs,
How
and
hideous.
bring you memorabilia. Well, if you want to know how hideous it was, I made enough money to pay my fare over and back again. And
in one afternoon?
In one afternoon.
In one afternoon.
Hang on, what class on the aeroplane were you in?
Baggage.
And somebody... Who said that?
Fiona.
Somebody had my old uniform, which they had paid thousands of dollars for.
They need to get
and she could still
help.
almost get into it. And don't you say you could get in it properly, because I've seen the photos.
I did get into
Your
it.
tits were hanging out of it. Don't lie.
They were not.
She's
Your
as
Keith,
skinny
wait
as
till
skinny,
Sunday.
Amanda. She has held
Carol,
her head.
are you still there?
Photographs.
Yes, I'm trying to bring some reserve and dignity to the
Carol,
conversation.
we're asking you to keep some...
But I'm interested to hear, Amanda, that you've already been blooded in this whole process. I'm looking forward to this coming weekend because it's going to be a whole new experience for me.
And me
I've
too,
managed
Carol.
to lead. Yes, I've managed to lead my life not being recognised as a person who is in prisoner.
Oh, hang on. I
because
did
most
some
of my work has been.
appearances with you naughty girl in England. Don't you tell fibs.
Well, but they recognised you. They would not recognise me afterwards. If you put me in
I
the
wouldn't
place and say,
recognise you,
this
no.
is the person.
No,
that
but they
played this
queued up to
part.
come and see you.
Oh, absolutely, they
Yeah.
did. Yes,
But Carol,
because she was
that-
a very popular character, and I think my character was popular because so much happened to her in 19 episodes, and then she left.
Yes.
And I think it was the best way to die, being shot under a tree by a policeman, yelling "bastard," and having Colette Mann cradle me as my soul went to heaven.
I know, and I will be reenacting that on Sunday.
and also, the script included my very favourite ever, the big print.
Directed by
favourite
Bill
direction.
Fitzwater, I
The
remember.
favourite bit of direction I ever read on a script, it said, "And 3 flies buzz around the blood from the wound."
And they had the
Specially
fly
trained.
wrangler on set.
Yes, exactly.
But I actually went back to Britain last year as well and did another one of those personal appearances in Dublin, same sort of experience, and people came to see me. But I did notice in Britain that it wasn't the same level as it had been a few years ago, that because it's not actually being shown anymore on
No,
UK
it's not.
TV. It's
in Birmingham.
finally stopped. It's where?
It is in Birmingham. Not the show, but the apparently the fans, they know where to go.
Oh.
And also, it's on cable TV.
The Midlands is
still?
always the
Does that mean we'll
hotspot for
get some
fans.
residuals?
Don't be
don't
ridiculous,
say that
Colette.
word amongst this
There's
group.
only one person who
No.
gets that.
Yes, shut up. No.
Can any of you explain whose idea was the show? Who created it?
Reg Watson.
Watson, yeah.
And
Sir?
what did one point? And what did Reg
trivia.
Watson think was its future and its potential?
I think it was because there's no original ideas, particularly in television, let's be honest. I think the original idea came from a British series called
Within These Walls.
Absolutely.
With Googie Withers.
Yes, that's right. And then I think he thought we could probably do an Australian version of that, which of course is what we all do, right around
everything.
the world now.
But it did go in quite a different direction.
Yes, but
Of its sort of its own volition.
when we were making the first 16 episodes that were just the 1 hours, then that was when they told us that we were going to 2 hours a week, and that's when Carol very cleverly said,
"Not
"I
with
won't
me,
be doing
no."
that. I'll be doing 3 of those, and then I'll be going." And so then we started making the 2 hours a week, and I would say, and I can say this because we were all around at the very beginning, those first 16 episodes, to me, still are the best out of the entire series.
Val?
Yes, I agree. Yeah, I think so.
Because we had the time
we
to
had
make
the time
them.
to. Yeah, but however, the great advantage was it also gave us that time to develop our characters.
Yeah.
So we weren't as rushed. So we did have the time to sort of put into the character development, which stood us in very good stead later on.
Yes, I think those of you who chose to stay grounded, you had control of your characters by the time that rush came on board, and you were having to do it so fast, but you knew what to do. And I heard stories about characters saying to directors who were coming in, "No, look, I wouldn't do that here, let me tell you," and more or less saying how the episode was going to run because of their inside knowledge of the characters.
And rewriting the odd scene, I'm here to say.
Fiona.
And standing on our feet,
Yes, Jane.
and then getting
Fiona.
into trouble because
Yes,
the
Jane.
journalists heard
I'm
about
just
it.
waiting
and-
for Val.
So, well, yes,
As we always did.
And so you better have.
Still going.
Fiona.
Because I've got my Steve Bruce with
Hang on,
me.
Fiona, just hang on.
Fiona,
now.
hang on.
Go.
Fiona, perhaps you'd like to talk a little bit about the writing. Not that you were one, but the importance of the writing and the quality of it.
Well, I thought it was excellent writing. I want to tell you first of all about my audition.
Oh,
I
we
was
want
the
to
last
hear
one
it.
because I was
Tell us
over
about your audition. That's
Well, I
really
was
good.
over in England, and I was the last person to audition. And Ian Bradley, I went in and did my audition piece, and then
Was a
Ian
producer.
Yes, he was a producer, and then he said, "Oh, I'm not too sure your hair's out," and he called a girl and got a rubber band and tied it back. Then he flew down to Melbourne and took the audition down to Melbourne, and they looked at it and they ummed and ahed and they couldn't decide, but they said, "Look, we like the actress with long hair, but I think maybe that one with the short hair, with it tied back, is the one we shall go with." And they had no idea it was the same person.
So versatile.
The level of perspicacity.
Yes, isn't that extraordinary? And you know, television executives aren't any brighter now.
As far as the writing goes, I don't think that you have to have the words in order to, go ahead and display what you've created as a character. And I thought it was excellent writing.
Our very
Really
best
good.
writer ever, though, was Denise Morgan, and there's no one will ever dispute that, I don't think.
All
No,
right,
she
look,
was
wonderful
brilliant.
to have you all. Carol Burns in our Brisbane studio, who played Top Dog Franky Doyle. Amanda Muggleton, who played Chrissie Latham. And Fiona Spence, who played Officer Vera Bennett, known as Vinegar Tits, in our Sydney studios. And here in Melbourne, Val Lehman, Top Dog B. Smith, and Colette Mann, who played Doreen Anderson, together with our co-host Jane Clifton, who was Margo Gaffney, all celebrating the 30th anniversary of Prisoner. I want to ask you all some more about the early days, the development, the great success, and also your connections to real prisoners.
I've got heaps of them.
On the Conversation Hour on 774 ABC Melbourne, celebrating the 30th anniversary of Prisoner.
On 774 ABC Melbourne.
Fiona Spence and Amanda Muggleton in our Sydney studios, Carol Burns in the Brisbane studios, and here with Jane Clifton, Val Lehman and Colette Mann as we celebrate the 30th anniversary of Prisoner. Now, have any of you ever been to a real prison?
Oh, yes.
Yes, we did a very famous and never to be revealed show called Prisoner in
I've got a copy
Pentridge.
of it.
Prisoner in concert.
Prisoner in
You've got a
concert.
copy of it.
Did you
Yeah,
do that
that's-
actually in Pentridge?
We went into we spent 3 days on location in Pentridge in a sort of marquee, the all singing, all dancing version of
During which I was
Girls'
offered a contract on anyone I liked to get rid of.
Oh, can I take that up now?
Sort of like the opposite of the get out of jail free
with
card.
inflation, but I'll let you know.
It was a very depressing 3 days, I
Well,
have to say.
let's talk about it, because you are doing a show that in a way was kind of, lampooning in a way, or sending up, playing to the pressures.
no,
or-
not
Sending up.
no,
the
the
worst
war.
thing about that
You
particular
didn't watch it, John.
Not a lot,
that
no.
particular show is that we went into D Division, and the audience, the prisoners, were not told that they were having a show coming. They were told they were having an extra contact visit with their family and near and dear. So did they want to sit down and be a nice audience?
No chance.
Bloody hell, they did not.
We looked out into the audience. They're also didn't know really we were, because we were recording songs live, which we'd rehearsed and everything. But
And you've got
really,
guards all
yeah.
around this sort of, tent and
It
marquee
was
and
depressing.
soundstage. No sound rehearsals. Do you
No.
remember that bit?
I remember.
Bit like
Yeah.
Johnny Cash.
Like the fight scene.
It was
Fight scenes
terrifying.
didn't get any rehearsal either. We had no fight coordinators. It's amazing none of us got really hurt.
I
Sheila
did.
broke a
I
wrist.
got hurt a lot.
Jane was always hurt.
I was always the winner. I never got hurt.
But real prison, of course, is nothing like the way you portray
But
it in
real
the show.
prison is nothing like the way we portray it, and people ask us about the research. In fact, real prison is unbelievably boring, and
Yes,
you
that's
can't
right.
show that on television, because the worst thing about being in jail, well, not the worst thing, clearly, I've never
Is how to
been in,
spend your
is
time.
how to spend your time and the tedium of it and the monotony of it and the tiny things that do flare up. And we did a lot of the tiny things that flare up and struck them all together.
Yeah, let's
Whereas-
face it, we weren't making a bloody documentary.
No, we weren't.
No,
It's supposed to be
we were supposed
entertaining.
to be entertaining.
Yep.
But
Exactly.
originally, when you first did your characters, did you do some work with
We were all taken out, well, not
Yeah,
all, but
we
the
went
original
to-
cast were taken out to Fairley Women's Prison. We were not allowed to speak to any of the prisoners, and we were marshalled into for afternoon tea into the Deputy Governor's office.
And she had a hump
And
on
she-
her back.
Oh, yeah.
True.
And denied that, well, she said, I said, how does the pecking order function amongst the prisoners in this particular institution? She said, what's pecking order? And I thought, oh, so intelligent, wonderful. And Sheila Florence is probably saying, ask about the lesbian thing, ask about the lesbian thing. So I asked about that.
Oh, what was the
And,
answer?
oh, no, we don't have that here either. And then I
course
discovered
not.
that she had been living with the governor, who was another lady, for about 18 years. Or
And that's how she got the hump.
Oh, I think enough of that.
Fiona.
I went to Pentridge Prison to see a play. And it was the last of the Knucklemen, and I can tell you there wasn't that much acting going on. They really, really got into one another. It was so violent.
Oh, dear.
Because it's a violent play anyway.
Yes.
But up there on that stage, I was just, oh, my God, not again. Oh, no. They were just really hurting each other.
Sorry, Fiona. Before I actually started Prisoner, I was working at the MTC as a choreographer, and I was sent out to Pentridge Prison for about 7 months on a weekly basis to teach dance to the A division. And
any good dancers?
Oh, fabulous dancers, really good murderers and great dancers. But the interesting thing was they were doing a play with the mess hall players called Royal Hunt of the Sun, which is about Pizarro and Atahualpa, the Aztec king. And they used to have these big fights on stage every night. And until I got there, they didn't actually choreograph the fights. They just would get new prisoners the next night because there'd be so many broken bones and broken bits. They would just get new prisoners in, and they were going through them at a rate of knots. So I was brought in to choreograph the fights.
Like the cast
That's another part of my life.
Things like that.
Yeah.
Let's replace.
Or Priscilla.
But there was always, I remember, because Colette and I and Betty Bobbitt had a little singing group, which was an offshoot of Prisoner called the Minibusettes, and we did a couple of gigs. We went to Yatala Prison in South Australia.
Why you were called the Minibusettes? Because when we were going in this minibus location, you couldn't shut them up. They wouldn't stop singing.
That's so unfair. We were so
I'm so jealous of you, Val.
Yeah, thank you. Anyway, we did go to Yatala Prison in South Australia, and it's a pretty tough environment to go into, and you do, what you're doing, frippery as it is, even though it wasn't satirical and it wasn't taking the whatever out of it, it was a very mild version of what they were living, and it was always blokes'
Can't
prisons.
Can't you say that word on the ABC? No, you just left it out.
Like everyone's prison in England. Hollingsworth. I went to. That was a weird thing. When I was working in England, first was doing personal appearances. I kept being invited to prisons. Like, you must want to come and have a look at this. You must want to be involved. I went, well, no, not really.
Carol Burns, have you been to a prison?
I remember A Division at Pentridge. I was down there when you did that, but I didn't go to Fairley Women's Prison. I think that had been done before I arrived because I was working.
You were still coming from Queensland.
Yes, I was still.
Somewhere.
That's right.
Yes. Coming from somewhere, so I missed out on that, and I didn't get to do any of the musical numbers and things. So my exposure to prisoners. Pardon?
You would have been good in those.
Oh yes, I would have been the bass baritone line.
Okay, Fiona, did you sing in Prisoner in Concert?
No.
I wasn't even in it.
She wasn't
Oh,
in it.
gone by then.
Had you gone?
I did something.
Amanda, did you?
I don't sing.
Yeah, I was wearing some amazing outfit.
I was born under a wall.
That'll be on YouTube tomorrow.
Amanda Muggleton was not in it.
No, she
I did some pantomime thing.
No, you didn't.
That was the pantomime before we got trapped in the tunnel.
We escaped during the pantomime.
That's right.
My character discovered after 10 years of prison that she was claustrophobic.
That's right.
But I was
your character altogether.
I was quite shocked to see that after I'd been a lesbian with the beautiful Carol Burns, I then got married to a bloke.
It can happen.
Yeah.
Can it happen?
But what about the characters that got killed within the show and came back as another character later? Didn't Liddy Clark
the
get
guy that I
murdered in
shot,
the sink?
Yes, the man that I shot as my husband
Went
ended
into
up
politics and died.
Truck drivers and things, he kept turning up. Yes.
That was the great thing about the show too, was that it was a fantastic opportunity for guests, female guests. So every single actress, just about, in Australia, got to go.
And not only that, a lot of actresses that probably perhaps wouldn't be working in series normally because they were given such meaty characters to work with too, would work in Prisoner.
It was great because right through my career after that, whenever I was anywhere, I would say, oh yes, I've worked with that person, and it was because they had been into Prisoner maybe for even only 1 or 2 episodes, but we got to work with the most amazing people and learn from them, which was fantastic.
So it's like an extended family, but
Yes,
sometimes these are a
network.
blessing in disguise because you can get so closely associated with a character that it ends up that you're not cast for other things because you're too closely associated with it. Did that affect any of you? Amanda, you kicked onto all sorts of things.
Yes, it was a wonderful experience for me, but I think Grundys were very good to me in that they let me in and out all the time. I was only ever in 107 episodes. But
Only?
Well, no, but they weren't all in order. I would go in and do 3 months and then leave and do a fabulous show at the Melbourne Theatre Company or the Pram Factory or whatever, Playhouse, not the Playhouse, the Playbox and all those wonderful places. And then I'd go back in. And I think it did my career a fantastic it gave it a fantastic boost. It was because of Prisoner that I got steaming, and there's that awful stigma that used to be attached to soap operas, and sometimes still is, that if you're in a soap opera, you're not a real actor until you do theatre, and that is so wrong, because to make a soap opera work, you have to be brilliant, because very often the scripts aren't brilliant, and you have to make the best of it. And people used to poo-poo people that were in soap operas, and that's why you get some actresses who deny that they were in it or in any other soap operas.
Particularly if they want to go to work in England. One particular I know of that works through the RSC, who denies that she was
RSC, Royal Shakespeare Company.
Yes.
I don't know why, but I'm very proud of all our work in prison, and I feel very lucky to have been part of it. And I would never say that I wasn't in it. Never. I'm very proud.
And Carol, you've been someone who was in that short amount of time, and you've had a number of fantastic roles in both film and theatre. It hasn't really affected you in that way, has it?
No, like Amanda, I loved being in it because it was such an ensemble. And I think in terms of people coming back and returning into it, I think that would have been wonderful to do. But I being shot so publicly, I don't think I could have come back in as anything else in that show. But it's a bit like Law and Order. When you watch Law and Order, they've always got they have an ensemble of actors that they keep bringing back in year after year. And I think that's part of that thing that the public can do, of identifying you as an actor, not that character. And that's a good thing about doing other parts in something, because they get to know that you've got these variety of skills. And I think we've all had people who have followed our other careers that have been in, I've had people come up to me and say, well, I would never have been to the theatre if you weren't in it, but now I love it and I go all the time. So
yes. Yeah, sorry, Carol. I think the same with me, because when I left Prisoner after about 3.5 years, I think was how long I was in it, I then was lucky enough to get a job on the Don Lane show as myself, and started sort of another career of being like a presenter, like celebrity type person on television.
Personality, Colette.
A personality.
A television personality.
A television personality. And it was interesting because even though I am still very recognisable for Prisoner, people know my name, and that was to do 3 years on a show like that was good, because they actually knew who I was and didn't call me Doreen in the street quite so much.
I found it very limiting in terms of television or screen work. That's when I was typecast. I think in a way it's partly because we're more sophisticated when it comes to casting on stage. Not only are you allowed to be versatile on stage, you are expected to be. This is a courtesy some not always extended, I think, on screen as much. So all the work I did in England, they wouldn't let me do any screen at all. I did all stage for 7 years. No screen at all.
Fiona, has that been the same for you?
Well, after Prisoner, I went to Monash University to do an arts degree, and then I went up to Sydney to do...
Same thing.
Yes, what was it? Home and Away.
Yes.
And then I linked up after Home and Away, I linked up with you in England, and we went round the UK.
Yeah, Fiona and I had that experience that there was a play version of Prisoner, which was done in the 90s, and there were 2 series of it, and it was a 40-minute show with an interval.
Thank God for the interval.
My kind of show. I love a short show is a good show.
Oh, me too, Amanda.
Fiona and I, we did 13 towns in 13 weeks, didn't we? And it was like 2,000 people a night, 8 shows a week. And even though the show was 40 minutes long...
With an interval.
In fact, when Fiona would walk on stage, there was a standing ovation for 20 minutes, which was good. And then I'd come on stage and there was a standing ovation for 10 minutes.
Well, there you go.
And after the show, we'd sign autographs for an hour.
Oh, and it was quite a long job.
It was a huge night in the theatre. And in Glasgow, the Strathclyde police had to be called because there was a riot in the queue of people.
With the blockies.
There were the blockies. They were queuing up. So that was a fantastic theatre experience, wasn't it, Fiona?
Yes, it was. It was.
Here, Val, what about when we arrived at Manchester Airport? You, me, Sheila, and Carol? Were you with us, Carol, when we all arrived in Manchester for that other time?
No, I arrived separately.
Carol and I were actually already in the UK when you lot arrived.
Oh, well,
But then we all went on that tour of doing what was called On the Outside, wasn't
On
it?
the
But in that,
outside.
we were very protected because we were up on stage, and they used to do. It was very decorous and controlled.
Q&A stuff,
Interview, Q&A, yeah.
Yeah.
But we were mobbed
I
at
hope
Manchester
it's going to be
Airport.
decorous on Sunday.
I
This is
suspect
my
not.
first one ever.
Oh, Colette, you're in for an absolute
no,
joy and a
you will be
surprise.
protected, I promise.
By me, Colette.
Couple of other
What are we
quick
going
things.
to do, B?
A couple of other quick things for you all. First of all, the role of Melbourne as the spark, the nucleus for not just Prisoner, Neighbours as well, which is still running.
They started after us.
How astonishing is that? But it's still holding its own and
Yeah.
overseas, territories all over the place, translated into I don't know how many different languages. Why is Melbourne the place where these shows come from? And maybe if we can start by going away from the Melbourne group here. Fiona or Amanda or Carol?
Oh, I love Melbourne. I think it starts a lot of fabulous things. Every time I'm coming down any minute to do The Man from Muckanuppin by Dorothy Hewitt, which is also having its 30th anniversary this year. It's going to be on at the MTC, and I can't wait to get there. Every time I come, I just think I should be living here again. But I've got myself so entrenched now in Sydney. It's so difficult once you live somewhere.
But Amanda, why is it that Melbourne spawns
I
these
think-
successful things?
I think Melbourne is full of amazingly wonderful people who can find the ways of putting these things on. I don't know if it's your government down there or what.
I think it has a cultural energy. That's what I think
It is a
it has.
cultural energy. You're right. I couldn't find the words.
It's
But
the concentration of ideas that's down there, I think, and there's
And it always
living in
has
Queensland. So many people go from Queensland down to Melbourne. They skip over the top of Sydney and head to Melbourne, like Paul Denny, who's a splendid actor from Queensland, has gone down there. There's so many people that you bump into that they're actually ex-Queenslanders, and so much for Queensland being a cultural desert. We seem to supply everybody down to Melbourne, who then blossoms, and Melbourne can claim the blossoming, and I think that's quite right, because there's a concentration of producers and of interested people that an idea that's lost by one person can get picked up by another.
Yeah, and it's the fringe that's going on there all the time, which is so exciting. We try to do it here in Sydney, but you've got so many wonderful little theatre nucleuses that build up and go sort of underground, and then they suddenly become famous. And it's out of those groups that come these wonderful directors, writers, and producers.
So you can actually nurture something like this. It's not luck, it's not coincidence. You can create it.
Yes.
Absolutely
Okay,
not.
in that case, we've now got the best and most successful Australian television drama for years on screens, also made in Melbourne, which is Underbelly. So are we getting, from that ongoing, that momentum, are we getting a rekindling of the local television industry?
Wouldn't
Colette?
that be nice?
Colette?
I think drama on television is definitely improving, and I think it went through a really bad patch there for a while. And I mean the first series of Underbelly, I have to be honest, I only saw the first episode of the second series, but the first series of Underbelly I thought was amazing, was really amazing, and the production values was extraordinary. I'm not mad keen on the second one, I'll be honest with you, and I don't know whether that's because there's a bit of Sydney in it. Maybe that's why I don't like it.
Oh, is it?
Yes, because it's about Tale of Two Cities. But
Oh, right. But to me, it was just full of breasts the other night.
Oh, yes,
yes.
a lot of breasts. And a lot
Keep abreast of the situation.
and a lot of Matt Newton looking smouldering.
Smoking.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the other thing I wanted to say
And
about the
smoking.
Melbourne thing too that was very important, even though the Prisoner was created by Grundy's, Melbourne was the home of Crawford Television Productions.
Yep.
And if anyone put Australian television on the map
Yes,
with
indeed.
DB4 and Homicide and Matlock and all those
Sullivans.
shows and the Sullivans, it was Hector Crawford and his dynasty. And it's the only reason I ever got onto TV was to auditioning through
that who we have
Crawford's
to thank?
Henry, in fact, specifically.
So
But
this
it
is
was
the
also
tale.
a family down
That
there.
is
Yeah.
And
the
they trained people.
Yeah.
all the
There's something in
directors
the
and-
water.
and they looked after their actors and they looked after their shows, and I think that Grundy's was able to latch on to that thing that was created by that dynasty of Crawford's people.
I don't know, because the same thing, and Jane, you've had a foot in this camp too, the rock and roll industry. So much of music comes out of Melbourne's live music scene, and other cities don't seem to, no matter what they do, be able to create that same momentum.
It's the weather.
I think it's what Amanda said too.
is.
That's the fringe too,
Yep.
and it's also we have a very strong theatrical fringe in Melbourne, and I think that feeds into it.
Lots of text messages for you all, including people saying how good it is to hear the cream of Australian talent
They need
enjoying each other's
She's got a
company.
lot of things to say about you, John.
Sorry, you can't come to the party. It's all booked out.
Memories of Sheila Florence.
Oh, darling Sheila.
Dear darling Sheila, she'll be kind of with us on Sunday.
She will.
And she'll be drinking out of the cardboard handbag.
Jane Clifton, an incident at Bombay Rock where a disgruntled prisoner fan is alleged to have expressed their love and desire for you in a fairly violent and aggressive way.
Pouring a jug of beer over my head. I think it was at the Polaris Inn, actually. But no, maybe not.
So it's not
So
a...
many.
Did that really happen?
Oh, there was someone who came in who put his hand round my neck and poured a jug of beer over my head saying, I effing love you. Margo. Very drunk.
What would happen if he didn't like you?
I don't know. I'd get glassed, I think.
They can be very demonstrative, the fans, because when I was in Los Angeles, just after Franky Doyle had died, they had a wake for her and they marched down the street carrying a cardboard coffin and all ended up at a disco that I was invited to, where I experienced my first mosh pit.
Oh, darling, there's so much we've got to talk about on Sunday.
More text messages. A Harvard law professor who was here lecturing admitted that her only connection to Australia was that she loved Prisoner.
See,
And
hoity-toity.
in Canada, apparently, it was shown as under the title of Caged Women.
Yes.
You know what we
that's
called
right.
it, though?
The 30th anniversary cast reunion is on this Sunday out at Nunawading at the old TV studios. It's a gourmet barbecue with the original cast, as you've been hearing today, and a whole lot of other people, but apparently it's sold out. Is that right?
It is sold out, and we have a lot of visitors from Sweden, England, America, Ireland, and
Japan.
willing some
They're people who need to get
Dubai,
live.
Gran Canaria. Yeah.
They're
Marvellous
all flying
stuff.
in.
To Carol Burns in the Brisbane studios, Fiona Spence and Amanda Muggleton in the Sydney studios, Colette Mann, Val Lehman and Jane Clifton here in the Melbourne studios. Prisoners' 30th anniversary. Happy birthday to you all. Jane Clifton, thank you for co-hosting.
The Conversation Hour podcasts are available at abc.net.au/Melbourne. Subscribe now and you'll receive automatic updates with special guests, interesting interviews. It's a bit of fun. You'll be mad not to subscribe. abc.net.au/Melbourne.